Hello again. Welcome to Herd Immunity News. Today we have a fantastic guest. We have Mr. Howard Cox. Mr. Howard Cox is standing as the candidate for the upcoming mayoral election next year on the 2nd of May for the Reform Party. Mr. Cox is probably best known to you all for his amazing work with Fair Fuel UK. But before I go on any further, Howard, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to a nice chat with you guys.
Absolutely. Well, we'll just get on to the main subject, which is the upcoming election, the mayoral election in London. This is an amazing opportunity for yourself. Obviously, there are challenges here, but there is a lot of opportunities. And if we can just touch on the election result from Uxbridge and Ruslip, where this really became, for the want of a better term, the ULEZ election. ULEZ is encapsulating everybody at the moment if you're interested in business or you're interested in freedom and liberty and also just getting in your car. Where has ULEZ gone wrong?
Well, I think we need to go back a little bit further. The issue is that right across the country, in all cities and all towns, and from national government, there's so many anti-driver policies. That's what we're seeing at the moment, and most of these anti-driver policies actually hit drivers and motorists in the pocket. And that's the scene. Rather than actually focusing on reducing carbon and improving air quality, it's just a knee-jerk reaction to take more money out of the proverbial cash cow motorist. And I, for 13 years, have been campaigning on behalf of drivers to keep fuel duty frozen. And in fact, we had actually had 6p reduction in the time I've been doing it, because there were planned rises to increase fuel duty by inflation, plus 2p every budget. And that would mean that we'd be paying for diesel and petrol something like 75 to £1 more at the pumps at Hong Kong levels, because they're paying something like nearly £3 per litre. And that's where I've come from, because I was a small business consultant back. He sat down talking about where he wanted to go, and he showed me his profit and loss for the last 2 or 3 years. And there was a line that just stood out a mile: the cost of fuel. And something like 47% of his fuel, of his costs, was fuel prices. And of course, 70% went to the government. And you're thinking about, he's paying corporation tax, he's paying national insurance, he's paying income tax and all the other things, PAYE stuff, plus fuel duty, plus the VAT on fuel duty. He's just an unpaid tax collector. And these are the sorts of things that really got on my goat. And so I decided to set up Fair Fuel UK. And the success, I built up a very good relationship with backbench Tories, and many of them are now cabinet ministers as well now. Particularly a guy called Robert Halfon MP, Harlow MP. We got very close, and he became Mr. Fairfield UK in Parliament. And but in the process of this, I built up 1.7 million supporters who signed up. Obviously, drivers and small businesses, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But what has happened, and going back to your question about ULEZ, is that in the last year, I've just been bombarded with, why don't I set up a Fairfield UK political party and stand as an MP or even a mayor of London? I'm in London. I was born in London, educated in London. I still work in London. And I'm sick to get the fact that London has become so congested, so restricted. It's not moving freely. It's dominated by the Wild West of cyclists, cycle lanes and things like that. And before anyone has a go at me, I'm pro-cycling. I'm not anti-cycling whatsoever, but it's got to the stage where the balance has been lost in terms of road usage. So I took these requests going very seriously. And then I got this phone call from a certain Richard Tice, who's chairman of leader of the Reform UK. And you may have heard of another guy called Nigel Farage. And
the name rings a bell.
And obviously, I think he's a honorary president or chair of Reform UK. But Richard Tice is the active CEO, the leader of the party. And he said, Howard, look, you've been on my show on Talk TV many times and things like that, and I've got to know how you think. Yeah. I think you could be mayor of London. Well, I thought to myself, no, that's not me. I don't want to. I'm not a career politician. I'm apolitical. In terms of the campaign, I voted Tory for 50 years, but never again. And really, what happened? Richard said, "Well, I think have a think about it." So I sat down with my wife over several glasses of Malbec, and we had and she said, "You've got to get this out of your system, Hal. You've got to do this because you're so angry." And I said yes to do it because I looked at their policies, and one of the policies was cutting fuel duty by 20 pence per litre, getting rid of ULEZ, all ULEZ, not just the extension, and LTNs and 20 mile. And I went through the whole thing, tripling the number of bobbies on the beat, and and tripling the number of affordable housing in London. And I thought to myself, hey, this sounds like what the Tory party should be. And so I said yes, and that's where we are. And the way ULEZ is where it's gone wrong is that ULEZ has been based on false premises, particularly false health data. You probably heard Sadiq Khan regularly come out and say 4,000 people dying every year. Well, that's a pathological lie, and I don't care if he sues me for that because the evidence is to the contrary. The fact is, it's very simple. There's no one has died of air quality issues except one person who was back in about 8 or 9 years ago, and that young child had, I think, she had severe asthma, and poor air quality doesn't cause asthma. It doesn't cause it at all. Allergens cause asthma. And for the uninitiated on here, my early life, I'm 68 now, but from the ages of 18 to 25, I worked for a pharmaceutical company and I was dedicated to anti-asthma drugs. So I know a little bit about that. I'm a pharmacologist by training, which is a drug scientist. So I understand these sorts of things. And well, from point of the ULEZ thing, Sadiq Khan's also, we had a public consultation, which he just threw into the bin when 2 out of 3 said they were anti the ULEZ extension going out to the whole of Greater London. And he also, 5,000 of my supporters, he disregarded, who responded to the public consultation. He regarded them as one vote. And yet 4,000 cyclists who took part in it was regarded as 4,000 votes. Yes. So these are the sorts of things. The guy, he's actually, he's even been told by Transport for London, his own body that runs the transport, that there'll be no demonstrable change to air quality whatsoever by extending the ULEZ to the M25. He's ignored that. He's ignored the consultation results. He's manipulated it. And so ULEZ is purely, no one can argue with this, a cash grabbing scheme, especially when down in the underground, I've been walking down with my little air quality meter, which is approved by the WHO. And I've been to about 14, 15 underground stations, compared roadside level particulate matter with down by the platform. And in summary, it's about 1,800% worse down at the platform level than at roadside level. And London is now in the top 25% of cleanest cities in the world. And yet he's still going ahead with his expansion. And unfortunately, the recent court case, the judicial review, gave him license to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right to quote the Imperial College London statistics, which have been debunked now, and to say that this is exactly as you said, the 4,000 people dying a year figure is absolute nonsense. And it's quite sad to see that this has the backing of the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, as well. Yep. And it takes us back, though we won't take you there, into the COVID era, where statistics were completely blown up. Misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it. This is what a lot of Londoners will be looking at after the COVID era, to see that these statistics are just being used, as many people say, to fleece them. This is all this is. Motorists are being fleeced. Now, I lived in London for 10 years, Greater London, a beautiful Bromley, down in Kent. I'm sure you know it. And now they're under the caution. As you correctly said, the judge has ruled in favour of the ULEZ expansion. But you, unlike Susan Hall, the Conservative candidate, you're looking to scrap the entire ULEZ project completely.
That's correct. I mean, it's interesting that he quotes again Sadiq Khan, and that ULEZ has actually brought down air quality or improved air quality issues and that sort of thing. Okay, then it's done its job. Let's get rid of it. And those are the sorts that he can't handle that. But what gets the hypocrisy of it all is that he's saying, bring in your dirty diesel, your dirty petrol car. We welcome you, provided you give me dosh. And that's there's one little, and I always bring up this little example. There's a midwife who worked or used to work in St Thomas's Hospital, right opposite to the Houses of Parliament, and she does shift work. And her shift, she gets paid about £80 for her shift. It costs her £56 to get in with her little Peugeot, whatever little thing it is, which does about 60 miles to the gallon. It's reliable, always starts up beautifully. Doesn't have to worry about range anxiety for an electric vehicle or something like that. She gets there, but she's got to pay 2 congestion charges and 2 ULEZs. And that comes to £56. And she's earning 80. So she's now given up that, and she's gone outside Greater London to work in a hospital outside of that. Now, so Mr. Khan, where are you helping people? And this is the problem. ULEZ hits the poorest hardest, low-income families, sole traders. And I'm the only candidate. I mean, there's 3 major reports I've done regarding motorists and drivers. One is on the 2030 ban. One is on the cradle to grave comparison of EVs versus diesel and petrol. And the one here, which is the CEBR one, only about 3 or 4 months ago, I'm the only candidate that's actually asked how much has ULEZ cost the economy of London. And the CEBR are very respected independent economists, and I pay for this myself. And people like Susan Hall and the Tories and that sort of thing should have been doing this sort of thing in opposition to Khan. 7 years in opposition, and they haven't touched the sides of the man. He's walked all over them, roughshod. He doesn't care about that sort of thing. But this particular report showed that it's approaching, well, about £800 million a year has been taken off the GDP of London.
Yes.
And people say, what does that mean? It basically means plumbers, electricians, and those sort of people aren't coming into London now to work. Less taxi drivers, all that sort of thing. So they're paying less into the economy. They're spending less money in the shops and all those sorts of things. The CBR are much cleverer than me to actually tell you exactly how they work this out. But I asked them about 800 million. It's going to be growing. And so the important thing about this is I'm standing as a candidate for Reform UK, and I wish we get rid of labels, because I've been accused by a lot of people on Twitter and social media. I'm going to split the anti-Khan vote, and he'll get back in. Well, I simply say to that, well, that's fine, Susan. You step down. I might make you deputy mayor. We can have a good laugh about that. But it's a serious point. I'm standing on a principle here for fairness and get London motoring and moving again. And I promise you, you heard me say earlier, I'm going to triple the number of the bobbies on the beat, and I'm happy to explain those things, and affordable houses. But the most important thing, I want London to become a much more car, truck friendly, motorbike friendly city again, but absolutely focusing on getting rid of dangerous drivers and making sure the roads are safer. All common sense things and very populist. But I'm afraid at the moment in time, I'm up against this usual thing. I get to the voting booth, Labour or Tory. Yeah.
And that's something that people should completely reject and look at the track records. I mean, if you look at the last 2 London mayors, one was a sort of comedic journalist in Boris Johnson, and the other one was a sort of, in our terms, a very controversial human rights lawyer. Now, you've actually got experience of working with small to medium-sized enterprises in the capital, where you're from. You understand the challenges that they're up against. And if we look at areas from King's Cross Station right down to Westminster, you've got that. You've got Tottenham Court Road, for example, which feeds into the West End, feeds into Soho. Now, with the ULEZ restrictions, a lot of those businesses will be completely starved. You'll stop that.
Absolutely. I mean, the most important thing for me is, I also get rid of low traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-an-hour zones and pinch points and those stupid speed bumps. Every time I get in a black cab, the iconic black taxi driver sitting there, and some of them recognise me now, which is quite nice to know. But I always ask the question, what do you think of London? And I just sit back and listen to about 5 minutes tirade.
Yeah, the air turning blue.
Absolutely. And at the top of that thing is, why the hell, believe it or not, okay, they're anti-Khan, but they're also anti the Tory government now. Loads of these taxi drivers have been middle of the road, slightly right of centre Tories. Yes. And they've always done that. They're great believer in the state should help those people who can't help themselves. But if you can help yourself, you don't depend on the state. And these people are simply saying, why are they destroying our lives? And why hasn't, and people like Mark Harper, I've got 5,000 or 6,000 people have written to him through my technique of trying to email politicians to call on him to intervene and to scrap ULEZ, or at least put a moratorium on it so we can actually get a proper public consultation in place that we adhere to. How can a politician, an elected politician, ignore the majority the way they're ignoring the majority? And that's Labour and the Tories combined. I met up with Keir Starmer in Portcullis House, which is, for your viewers and listeners, is actually where the MPs have their offices in London, Westminster. And I was sitting talking to a couple of Tory MPs. I had meetings with them, and Keir Starmer walked by. So I got up and I said, "Hello, Sir Keir, it's Howard Cox of Fairfield, UK." I said, "I know who you are." And he went like that. And he jokingly put his little hands around my neck. He said, "You're a bane in the." Well, I said, because all the tax that I've saved motorists, but obviously cost Westminster, so they can't spend even more rubbish on projects. But I said, look, the important thing here is, Sir Keir, how can you defend a dishonest mayor who's put your party into disrepute? And his comment was coming back. He says, "Yeah, but he's very popular in London." And I said, "Pardon?" I said, "You are so deluded." Goodness. And he's certainly not popular in the donut of Greater London. And he said, "Oh no, you do well." But now look at him now. What's going on now? He's actually obviously laid into Sadiq Khan privately by suggesting he approve his scrappage scheme, and that's happened recently, even though that doesn't touch the sides. But the point I'm trying to get across to you, everyone here, I'm not a career politician. I'm not in this to make loads of money at all, because that's not in my psyche. I wouldn't have run a campaign for 13 years voluntarily. Rich, been really working 7 days a week. I haven't had a holiday for 15 years because of this campaigning I've been doing. And I've got a lot of respect from the media, a lot of respect from politicians. But they're scared to do the simple thing in life, and that is to motivate and incentivize people to move to cleaner fuels, rather than just saying you will only drive electric vehicles in 2030, and we're going to hit you in the pocket with higher taxation. Excuse me, that's not going to go well in the ballot box. And yet we see Rishi Sunak coming out trying to be friends of the motorists now. And I nearly fall off my chair every time I see that headline, because he's not a friend of the motorist. He's presided. We are still some of the highest tax drivers in the world, all those sorts of things. And that's why Reform UK are talking common sense, and they'll be on the side of the motorist. But above all, they would incentivize low-income people, small businesses, and they are the commercial heartbeat of any economy.
Well said, sir. You're certainly in campaign mode. Even though it's May the 2nd, you're certainly in good form and good voice. But just touching back on Mark Harper, who was the head of the COVID recovery group, and he was also a massive part of the European recovery group. You would expect someone like him to see the common sense of ditching the whole net zero ideology is a complete fudge. And that's me being polite. It's something else, but I won't say it for our more discerning viewers and Fitzrovia that will hopefully be voting for you, sir, and Belgravia. But look, there's nothing between the Conservatives and Labour when it comes to net zero. Your party leader, Nigel Farage, as well, have come out and said, look, this whole thing is an utter nonsense. We are for clean air. We are for clean water. But we don't want to cripple our economy and our country. Just quickly, on net zero, the whole concept and the whole ideology, what are your views, please?
Well, it's very, very simple. I don't think we should have any targets at all. I think we should be looking at a simple thing about actually incentivizing people to move to cleaner fuels, etc. We should be stopping pollution. We shouldn't be dumping all that horrible stuff into seas that we're doing, which is a government-controlled issue, the water balls and all those sorts of things. We should be getting rid of, the plastics and things that's being dumped into, all those sorts of things. Everyone with any common sense and a right mind would obviously back those. But in terms of actually the fact that we're only responsible for 1% of the emissions in the world, we can go on to that subject about China, India, and South America, and North America, all of that lot. This is why I get so angry with the protesters, the stop, Stop Oil Crew and all that lot. Why are they not going over there, or at least campaigning outside of the embassies in this country or something like that? But Where I sit on net zero, we don't need any targets. So one of the things I talked about 3 reports. One of the reports I did was on this 2030 ban, which for people, just in case to remind you, is that you won't be able to buy a new diesel or petrol car from 2030 in this country. And I asked the question again, the CBR, bless their cotton socks, a paid report in partnership with the Motorcycle Action Group and the Alliance of British Drivers. We paid the CBR to actually ask them, please, could you work out what is the cost of the 2030 to the economy? And they came back very simply. And in fact, I'll throw this at you. I pretend to be a little special advisor walking into my minister's office of transport and say, look, hey, I've got this great idea. If we ban all the new sales of cars, diesel and petrol in 2030, I'll tell you what, you'll get 76 billion pounds worth of green benefits. He said, oh, that's fantastic. So how much would it cost?
Exactly.
Oh, 450 billion pounds. So it's only like 5 times the amount. And yet this is a government who's seen that report. The CBR actually advised the government on other things and everything, and they're completely ignoring that. And equally, the third report with this cradle to grave comparing and don't forget, we're being forced into one mode of transport, and we're not going to be ready for it. The national grid, and we can argue about solar and all the other things, and wind power and all that stuff. The fact is, I'm actually pro-electric vehicle, but we're not going to be ready for it. In fact, I worked with Quinton Wilson. You may have heard of Quinton Wilson, who is actually on Top Gear.
Former Top Gear.
Yeah, and he's a very dear friend, incredibly intelligent guy, and I like the guy very much indeed. But he's moved to what he says, he's moved away from the dark side of fossil fuels over to the electric vehicles.
Well, what about hybrids?
Well, exactly.
Hybrids, if we've got power outages.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I drive a hybrid, and it's a fantastic piece of kit and everything like that. And but the cradle to grave analysis comparing to when we all the way electric vehicles, when they're actually first a bit of a cobalt or a bit of lithium is taken out, by slave labor, all the way to the disposal of the vehicle through usage, compared to the same analogy to diesel and petrol vehicles. I'm afraid you're going to find this report again with the Alliance of British Drivers and Motorcycle Action Group. The report is very clear, very objectively put together, and it says this: EVs are not green.
Yes, absolutely. Look, there's no cost-benefit analysis. Yet again, we saw it during the COVID inquiry. I mean, I wouldn't let these people run a bath personally. Having been involved in business, you're in business. These people they're actually a liability to this country. And before we get onto the civil service, or the blob as they're called, and sorry, it's very early in the morning to speak about such disgusting things. But it goes beyond the wit of man. And just looking at the wit of man, there was a comment today from Sadiq Khan, who, it's just incredible how this man's remained in office for 8 years, Howard. And this is me saying it. He's on this morning talking about how mobile phone manufacturers should be doing more to stop people's phones being nicked.
He wants them to make them dead simple. They're too complicated, so they're not so attractive to nick. I mean, well, the guy's deluded. You know that everything about his scrappage scheme. I'll give you £2,000 to change your car. Oh, by the way, you got to pay 20 grand to get a new one. And it impacts. And I say this again: low-income families, poor people, are the ones being hit here. All of the things they're doing are aggressive. It hits small businesses the hardest. The big businesses now, to be honest, life isn't too bad for them. Share prices going up, the interest rates going up, and that sort of thing. But it's hitting again. And this is the thing that hurts me hard. I've got a daughter who's 31 years of age, and she drives 40-ton HGV trucks. I'm really proud of her. And she's an incredible,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. But she's struggling, even on a £40,000 a year salary. She can't get a mortgage. She lives in Orpington in London.
I know it. Not far from Bromley.
All that sort of thing. But she's absolutely typical of the youngsters now, and that's why I'd like, pleading through you, I will be helping you guys make your lives better in London, because London's probably one of the most expensive cities in the world, one of the most congested cities in the world, one of the most difficult to work in cities in the world, and yet at the moment in time we have a government that is actually, frankly, given up on London. It's ignoring London, and as much as Susan Hall, I think she's a good girl. I like Susan. I know her very well. I wouldn't count her as my best friend, but we're not. We do respect each other. But I'm afraid she will not do anything. London will stay exactly the same as it is now, congested, highly taxed, all those sorts of things. We need to make London attractive again, and we got to get London moving again. That's socially and economically.
Absolutely, and people can. I think you can put the pro net zero candidates in one group, and you in the other group as completely against net zero, for freedom, for liberty, and for more money in your pocket. Now, every election, every London mayoral election, I'll look at the last 2 or 3, there's a whole group of people sitting at home, right?
Yes.
And they really need to get out if they value their freedom and they're interested in having a London. Now, we're going to get onto security in a minute, about your policy regarding police visibility to protect the citizens who live there, because crime is going through the bloody roof. Looking at security and looking at the car, a lot of people want to use their car as a security measure, getting from A to B. I mean, does this area not come up with Khan and his mob?
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But he's actually got rid of thousands of bus routes. And in terms of, in fact, I saw right across the country, I think 8,000 bus routes have been actually removed. And, so let's get rid of public transport that one way, and also tax the only other alternative, driving, and those even more. The common sense, we've used that a few times here. There isn't any common sense. And in terms of actually security, my thing, it goes back to, you said about freedom of speech and just your freedom of choice, those sorts of things. I get fed up when I hear people on the TV, so-called commentators, political commentators, saying, we've got to get people out of the car, we've got to get them on the bicycle. And I'm saying, why? Yeah. I'm sorry. I like driving my car. I like being safe in my car, secure. I'm not sweaty and everything. I don't need a shower at the end of it. All those sorts of things. So your point is valid, and the security aspect is absolutely massive. And believe it or not, is one of the best COVID-free areas when we were driving in the epidemic time. So yes, it's so important that people have the freedom of choice. If they want to cycle, fine. If you want to use an EV, fine. But don't force it on us.
Absolutely. Well, they want it to look like Beijing. I think that's the ultimate destination, is to run the country like it was a CCP, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. Looking at police and the number of bobbies who are out on the beat, who are present, what are your sort of goals and thoughts on that one?
Well, it's the people who are anti me are trying to pick up, because I want to triple the number of bobbies on the beat, and that's 24/7. And it's interesting how people pick me up on that. I said, well, it won't cost much more money. They always do that. Simply, at the moment, as I understand it, only at any one time, only 5% of London's bobbies are ever on the beat. So I'm talking about moving it up to 15% in my tenure. Maybe hopefully do it very quickly. Obviously, my first day when I'm elected will be to meet the Chief Constable of London and sit with him and say, what are your aims? And I said, I bet you his aim will say, we've got to catch criminals, we've got to improve our policing, etc. I said, okay, fine. Let's stop policing Twitter and all those sort of things, and get them away from behind the desk and be in front of a PC. Let's get them out. We've got great technology. They can do their paperwork on the move. Yeah. We've got iPads galore and all that sort of thing. Why are we not using that? I actually think we can get more than triple the number of bobbies on the beat. But I've got a unique idea as well. At the moment in time, if you're going, I was driving down back from an interview, a late night interview, about 1 o'clock in the morning on the Old Kent Road, southeast London, and I noticed this girl walking down the street, and she was really, you could tell that she was nervous. I don't know whether she had an argument with a boyfriend or not, but everything like that. But she was nervous because coming up the other way, there was a bunch of lads. Yeah, they're probably decent lads. I don't know. I'm not casting an incredible bad image of them, but she crossed the road. And they crossed the road too. And she then,
Oh.
oh, that's. I stopped my car and that sort of thing. I said, "You okay?" She said, "Would you mind let me get in the car?" And I took her about half a mile down the road.
Yeah.
And that's. I'm not trying to be a hero here, but I thought, I suddenly thought she had nowhere to go. There's no police station. And even the actual 5G wasn't working at that time, and I had broadband and that, so you couldn't pick up the phone and say, you know, visually and actually all that sort of thing. So I've actually going to introduce public access points in 24 consumer outlets, and that's supermarkets, could be McDonald's, all that sort of thing. So they've got somewhere to go into where there's a policeman in there. It's not just going to be a bot, you know, a phone. It's going to be a permanently manned police area, that sort of thing, and that'd be great. It also gives security against shoplifting with a policeman sitting in there and all those sorts of things. And I thought, wow, why we do that? So why hasn't anyone thought of this before? It's dead simple. It's not too costly, even to the extent that Tesco's or the big four supermarkets probably would sponsor it and pay for it, and those sorts of things. So those were the sorts of discussions I would have with some of these organisations. So triple the number of bobbers in the beat and make access to actually sites where you feel unsafe, you can go into and ask for help, and those sorts of things. I think that will go down very, very well in right across London.
Absolutely. And I'm stunned to hear that only 5% of the police, what the hell are the 95% doing?
Well, they're sitting behind
keeping their brains warm.
Yeah, but these are actual. That's the statistic which the Reform UK have found out on the freedom of information. At any one time, there could be a different 5%, obviously, but I think it got up to about 7 or 8% at one stage, and even dropped as far as about 2 to 3%. So we've picked 5%, but if we can get it up to 15%, that'd be 3 times more. I mean, when was the last time you saw a bobby walking down the street?
Oh, when they were doing the Macarena with a rainbow flag draped around their head. And bumping and grinding against someone who, you know, I better not say too much against, and I quickly had it away on my toes, as they say, because they've become a laughing stock. I'm sorry I'm saying this, but the Metropolitan Police were once the shining jewel in the crown of the world's police force from their formation. They were the pride, even the uniform.
It's interesting.
Bring that back, please.
I've been to various anti-ULEZ rallies across London.
Oh, I know you have.
A couple of months, and I'm going to various ones coming up in the next couple of weeks. I think there's going to be a big motorbike rally, and I might be at the back of a trike coming in on the track. I look at that as an old man like me in leathers. That would be funny.
Excellent.
But interestingly, that at these rallies, I've met the policemen who are coming along to make sure we're good and we don't glue ourselves to the roads and things like that, which we don't, because we're a very lawful bunch of people. But I talk to the police. I always say, "Hey, what's your issues? What's your problems?" And they feel a bit suspicious to them. I said, "Look, I could be your boss as police crime commissioner." And they went, "Oh, really? Explain." And people don't know this, but I actually was one of the campaign managers that got Anne Barnes, police and crime commissioner, elected in Kent 10 years ago, up against the Tories, that was, and she's an independent, and that's happened. So I understand a little bit about it. I worked for the police for about 6 months afterwards, introducing some better communication methods in there. But I always ask them, and this young Bobby at Marble Arch said to me, the worst thing for me is I spend probably 9/10 of my time on bureaucracy. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, I'm filling in forms." He said, "What are the forms like?" And he actually described them to me. There's repetition. There's things not just in triplicate. I think it's in quadruple and quintuplet, this sort of thing. They have to do these things to protect. And I said, "What happens to these bits of paper?" He said, "They just go into a filing cabinet and get archived." I said, "What's the purpose of them?" He said, "To protect someone's arse in the future in case something comes back to haunt us." And I said, what, if I came in and said, got rid of all of that, would you be? He said, "I'd vote for you immediately." And I said, he was so chuffed. He said, "I just want to do what I wanted to do, which is catch criminals and protect." And I want to know more about my community and get to know what's happening in my community. I know this sounds obvious and a bit trite, but this guy was generally saying, I put him about 27, 28, young. And he simply said, once he heard I said that, he said, "I'm definitely telling people to vote for you, Howard."
Absolutely. And what you said, I'm still reeling from, about 95% of the police force are sitting.
No, that's the bobbies.
Okay, that's the bobbies, but that falls in line with the 95% of crimes are unsolved.
Exactly.
Can you see a correlation here, Howard?
It's not a
Like,
coincidence.
I'm not an analyst. I'm not as good as Professor Neil Ferguson with my modelling here.
Oh, don't bring that name
No,
up.
I don't want to have you reel back in horror at that name. But I mean, as I say, I lived in London for 10 years, from 97 to about 2007. And every time I go back now, I'm absolutely shocked at how far things have gone downhill. And policing is definitely one of those. I had a friend up at Kilburn High Roads Way.
Yeah, yeah.
And oh my goodness gracious. I mean, I'd really have to go with a stab vest on in these areas. And I'm making a slight little humorous remark about it, but I would suggest that all the police are, obviously protected against the scourge of knife crime when you're sending them out there on the beat, because this is a situation that's completely out of control in London.
Well, I would lobby the government massively on actually improving the sentences. If you're caught with a knife that is not, I suppose you remember the little days. You don't even need a pen knife now. You've got all those sorts of things. But if you're caught with a knife,
yes,
the first thing you're going to be done is, well, it's going to be confiscated, and secondly, and I've got to get my head around actually what is the best actually sentence. First, it could be a warning, but with hitting them in the pocket with 500 quid for a start or something like that. But the second one is you go to jail, and all that sort of thing. But I will be absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of Giuliani in New York, who you talk about net zero. I'm going to net zero crime. Everything is, and I don't like this classification. Oh, it's low level crime. I'm sorry, nothing's low level crime. If you're mugged, or if you've been shoplifted, or if you've been robbed, that's not low level crime, and that's what's happening now. And unfortunately, even I've been subjected to this. Now I'm a man of political interest, or whatever it's called.
You're a pet.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been. I know I'm being looked at. I know my phone's being monitored. When I go outside my house, if I need a little terrace house here in Cranbrook in Kent, I go outside and I can see there's zoom lenses on me and everything, or you name it, all those sorts of things. And I still get death threats, and I still get dog feces put through the door from wrapped up in cycle glass. But I'm sorry, people. That's not going to put me off, because we've got to get some common sense back. And I think the important thing, going back to the knife crime thing, I'm working. I can't give you everything we're going to do, but we've got some ideas for that, which I think people will find popular. And certainly the people carrying the. I mean, I'm a great believer in national service.
Yes.
Why don't we have one of the things I'm thinking of doing? The Duke of Edinburgh Awards and all those sort of things. Why don't we have the Mayor of London Awards for you do a year actually doing community service, everything from cleaning off graffiti all the way through to helping the elderly and that sort of thing. Why can't we do that? And you get something in part of your CV that will help you towards a job. Those are the constructive things to bring our youngsters, because it's youngsters are doing this. You don't see many 90-year-old pensioners with machetes. But that's the sort of thing, and we've got to be more inclusive in that way to get these people actually feel that they are part of London. They're not because Sadiq Khan has actually created more division than anyone I know.
Well, he has. He's created division, and crime's off the scale, as we say. And looking at just what you said there, if I can touch on it, looking at sports and boxing.
Yeah,
we've seen a boxing promoter for Matchroom Sports, Eddie Hearn, has been out, and he's tried his best, God bless him, to do a campaign to get more people from, say, like the Catford, Brixton, Bermondsey, Canning Town, you know what I'm talking about, Whitechapel, Bethnal Green. These areas are great areas with a history of boxing in their DNA. Do you think it would be something to consider to get these youngsters out off the streets, put down the knives, and get into the boxing ring?
Well, I know loads of pubs, and there's a famous one in the Old Kent Road. It's was it Marcus of Granby or something like that?
Oh yes, yes.
They used to have the gym above the pub.
Yes.
And that's where Henry Cooper and George Cooper. I played golf with Henry Cooper for a few years.
Right. Did you beat him?
He's a left-handed one. Put it this way: the handicap. We're about half and half. That's
all right. That's a good idea, Howard. That's a very good idea. You didn't want to lose to Henry.
Yes. Well, I didn't want his left hook in my face either.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, you've got to spot on. And I would actually get those sorts of people, those community leaders and community people, to encourage people. It would only take a month to get together about 4 or 5 things to sort this out. One of the other things I'd also do is actually pick the top 5 or 6 issues that matter, and I'd hold a public consultation on all of them,
Mm.
and adhere and get people's input into what they want, and I would adhere to the majority response. I would listen to people, and I generally mean that. I'm not a great fan of referendum, but in this case, I think London needs to get public opinion on side to get things through. And I would throw those straight at the national government and say, yes, obviously, the £20 billion budget and the massive black hole deficit that Sadiq Khan, I would inherit. Yeah. We've got to sort that out, that sort of thing, because by getting rid of all ULEZ, there's some income going to be going and etc. But it's not as much as you think, because the actual the cost of actually managing the administration and the fines and all those sort of things is massive. And you probably see today how many civil servants now have got £100,000 salaries and all that sort of thing. And one of the things that Richard Tice presented recently at the press conference, we just need to save £5 out of 100, and that would of every spend we do. And it doesn't sound much, does it? But it can be done, and most of that is bureaucratic savings.
Yeah, the Conservative government have been a disaster, and we're a sort of centre-right channel. Although we're a broad church, we welcome absolutely everybody. And as you say, these labels are now, they're indistinguishable, aren't they? Between Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, Green, they're all just one big much of a muchness, if I'm being perfectly honest. And you look at Mr. Fleet, Andy Fleet, up there in the West Midlands, and he's all for all these ULEZ.
Andy Street,
Andy Street. I beg your pardon. Yeah, very forgettable name. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, he's not quite a household name. I had to look that up, but you know the guy. I mean, and he's all for the same kind of closures. That's where Susan Hall, London Assembly member, as you correctly say, for all this time she's done net zero, basically, to stop ULEZ. That's why I think people will look at the like of yourself and say, look, this guy's going to do something for us. You're talking about crime, you're talking about integration, equality, real equality, and you've got a background that ticks the boxes. Well, but you've got a big challenge on your hands.
I have it indeed. And I hope I can convince people, and we mustn't fall for that. And I understand that tactical voting and all the other stuff. This is the first time. It used to be proportional, your second preferential vote, but now it's first past the post for the mayoral bit. The assembly members, I still think, on the preferential first and second, you can transfer your second vote to a first, etc. But in the case of the actual mayor, it's first past the post, which makes it much harder for me. But having said that, in 3 months, I think I'm around about 9 to 10% in terms of the polling, and that's coming from a standing start.
Excellent.
And it's a case of people like yourself getting this out. I really do not care about the labels. I really do not. Reform UK are just simply doing common sense, majority wished, introducing majority wished policies. That's what they're doing. It's common sense. If we listen to that, one of the big things for me is also housing. It's so important. Yes. Affordable housing is so critical. And again, another thing this mayor Sadiq Khan has lied about. He's actually said, he's increased loads of housing, building, all that. No, all he's done is some planning has been issued. Plans have been issued, but the building hasn't even started on these things. And he's actually counting plans that have been issued for housing. And most of these houses, there's no way my daughter can afford, a £500,000 flat. She just can't. And those sort of things. So we should look at, supported, these youngsters getting involved, joint issues, housing associations, and also look at rents again, all those sorts of things. Again, if we can actually do a scrappage scheme of, something of 120 million, we would not do a scrappage scheme. We put that 120 million into helping people find homes. Those are the sorts of things that matter to me. And when I talk to people, and I get this sort of chance to talk as well, I'm talking now passionately and caring like this, people actually buy into this. And it's nothing about how great I am. It's what I'm saying. It's common sense. And everyone thinks this, but it's scared to say it. And most of the backbench, when I actually announced Reform UK, I was standing for Reform UK. I had about 4 or 5 phone calls from very close Tory backbench MPs.
Right.
Some of them quite fine. I won't say what. One of them actually picked up the phone and he said, "You 4-letter expletive." And he said, "Why the hell are you not
hero?" He said, "You hero."
I wish it was. No, it was the strongest one you can use.
All right, okay, we get it. We get it.
Yeah, and he's actually said, Howard, why are you doing this? You know, you've got so much respect here. I said, well, okay, let's hang on. I went through the policies that we're standing on. He said, well, I agree with all those, Howard, but that's not the point. Why didn't you stand for the Tories? I said, I wasn't asked.
Well, and we heard you did an excellent interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg on GB News, and you basically said, you know, in an ideal world, Jacob, I would be the Conservative candidate, but we don't have a Conservative government. We don't have any Conservative ideologies in this country whatsoever. And on your housing, I mean, housing, look, if you can fix that, or you won't be able to fix it, but you will be able to undo a lot of the damage that's been done by Khan and his reckless attitude towards London, to the safety of the people, their business. Yes, he's popular to certain groups and communities out there, but I think it's about time that they gave the little heads a shake and say, like, enough's enough. We voted for our man, and he's obviously not fit for purpose. Let's give someone else an opportunity to make things work. So a couple of more minutes, if that's okay. Just 5 minutes left. So moving forward, what are you looking at doing over the next period? It's under a year now. You've got the 2nd of May, I believe, is the date of the election, Howard. So what are you looking to do up until that point in the last few minutes?
Well, I'm going to be holding a lot of meetings around London. Hopefully Richard Tice or Nigel Farage, or all three of us will be there, and people like Ben Habib, and hopefully Anne Widdecombe as well. All members of Reform UK. And we'll be going around London to say, you know, and basically talking the way we're talking now. At the moment, I'm mainly accused of being a climate change denier.
Right.
That the usual thing, and I hate I hate cyclists and all that. So that I never get. I think you'll agree with this. Most policy today is built on emotion, not fact.
That's right.
And I'm accused of. I'm even accused of being a mass murderer of young children because I support diesel and petrol cars. You know, and except going back to the Imperial College work, the 4,000 deaths story. And people don't understand that the 4,000 deaths has been actually another model, a bit like a Ferguson model. But on the operative word being premature deaths, and the premature deaths, and I don't know how they do this in the modelling situation, that in terms of life expectancy is shortened by about a week. You know, and we're living longer. The biggest thing about actually people dying isn't anything to do with climate change; it's due to poverty, or those are the sorts of things we've got to address. And that's what, as London Mayor, I will be looking to helping people who are struggling in London, and not just, you know, families and that sort of thing, or even the homeless. And I feel strongly about that too. But for small businesses, you get small businesses right, everyone prospers. You watch it, and those are sorts of things. And what I'm doing is I'll be having meetings around London with the usual gang. I'll be doing a lot of videos, a lot of films, etc. We're doing a lot of mailings, etc. All the usual campaigning stuff. And it's good that we've got GB News, even though a couple of my interviews, you mentioned Jacob Rees-Mogg, that's under Ofcom review at the moment.
Oh, really? Really? Yeah. You didn't say anything contentious? But
then... No, not me, but Jacob Rees-Mogg basically supported what I was saying.
Oh, yeah, he did. That's ridiculous. Ofcom looked in on that.
Well, they're looking at a couple of things. Also, Philip Davis and Esther McVeigh did an interview of me, a live interview from me from Trafalgar Square.
Right.
I did that, and they wish me luck and well. We hope you do well, and that sort of thing. And again, Ofcom, which has now become has been weaponized by the left. And as you know, there's a lot of things I'm doing investigation of this. Watch this space, but there's a big whistleblower thing coming out shortly. I did one recently regarding Sadiq Khan asking the BBC top bods, news bods, to saying, I'm not happy the way you're presenting the news about ULEZ. And I think we should stop that. So the top bods wrote to all of the regional London programs, BBC Radio London, Kent, South, I can't remember now, but a whistleblower came to me, they showed me the email, basically he said, you are not allowed to report on ULEZ without us getting, us approving what you're writing or what you're presenting. And so Sadiq Khan was trying to manipulate the agenda, that sort of thing. But I've got another one, which is, I mentioned the underground.
Yes.
about that polluting, but I've got some very, very powerful stuff to come out of that, which there's no way that Sadiq Khan can hide from that one. And that's to come out in the next couple of weeks. I'm working with a couple of national newspapers on that one. And I'm holding, there'll be a lot of hustings, as many as possible. A lot of them are online now, thank God. I'm 68 years of age. I can't rush around like I used to, but I feel 25, and I'm hell bent to get rid of this dishonest mayor as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And although the ULEZ, the ultra low emission zones, is in the London at the moment, and you are in the eye of the hurricane, this is going to the whole of the United Kingdom. Exactly. Every single town and city, rural communities. Angela Scum Rayner, as she said about the Conservatives, that's not me saying, she is scum, of course, lovely lady. She said, yeah, this is going to be out throughout the whole country, I think is what she said. And yeah, it's true, it's happening. Glasgow's got it, not far from where I am. And they're going to have to go through this entire project. They're fined £160 a day. Yeah. SNP always have to go that bit further, don't they? But £160 a day. So listen, I'll salute to you as a motorist, as a petrol head, as someone who believes in this country, believes in low state interference, small to medium-sized enterprises. We'll recommend and leave all the links to Fairfield UK, and we'll add to the 1.7 million. Let's get that up to 2 million. 2 million's got a nice sound to it. Let's do that. And that's an international thing. You don't have to be British, but you can join from anywhere. And we'll drop all your links. And we're impartial, of course, wink wink. But we hope you do very, very well and get the just rewards you deserve. But all that remains for me to say is, Mr. Howard Cox, thank you very much for appearing on Herd Immunity News, sir.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.